Hi, and welcome to the HofLine, your online hotline direct line to the women-only attorneys at Hofheimer Family Law. My name is Katie Carter, and I'm so glad that you're here. I'm a family law attorney at Hofheimer Family Law, a Virginia-based family law firm that represents women exclusively in divorce and custody cases. And I'm here today with my friend and coworker, Lori Michaud, who's going to talk about relocation with me. Thanks, Lori, so much for being here.
Oh, so happy to be here, Katie. And
It
it's
was
good to
so
see you
fun
this
getting this
morning.
all set up on the technology side. Like, wait till you see us out of our elements as we're trying to make Zoom work and Ring cameras work and all this stuff. Um, but I wanted to talk more about relocation. Can you tell everyone who's listening what relocation is and describe what a relocation case typically looks like?
Sure. So relocation in a family law practice means that one of the parents typically wants to relocate someplace, usually out of state, but sometimes just out of the area with the children. And so, the children are part of, are ensconced in whatever state they live in. And the state has an interest in making sure that they are not relocating out of the state without someone knowing where they are. So basically, in a nutshell, the law says you have to either have the consent of the other parent, the other party, or you have to have the court's permission to relocate. So that's basically what a relocation case is.
Womp womp, right?
Yeah,
Other parents' permission. That's like the devil in the details. Since
well, it
we
sounds simple, but it's really, sometimes it is and sometimes it's not.
Yeah, and we see a lot of it because we have such a heavy population of military families here. Service members and spouses find themselves stationed here in Virginia, but that isn't necessarily where they want to be or where their support network is, especially once the marriage doesn't work out. It's natural, I think, to want to go home or to be near family and friends. Especially if you have kids in common, especially if you have a service member spouse who is deploying or doing something crazy like that. But is it easy to relocate in Virginia? Is that something that the court considers?
Well, so it depends. These are very fact-specific cases. I'd love to give you a one-size-fits-all answer, but the truth is they're very difficult cases from the perspective that you really have to have all your facts kind of lining up.
Mhm.
And if you have the consent of the other party, it's a breeze. But I'm assuming that we don't have consent here, or we wouldn't really be talking about it right now,
Yeah,
right?
you'd already have consent and you'd have moved already.
Well, even if he gives you consent, like he says, go get out of here, go home to your mother, whatever, that's not the same thing as having consent in writing. And you
Mhm.
need consent in writing. You can't just rely on what he says in a moment of anger or whatever. So you have to really, consent is a little bit more complicated than just, a conversation.
Yeah, for sure,
Okay?
for sure. And I think too, he might have said that, I mean, just go on, get out of here, go be with your mom. Does that mean like forever? Or are we talking about a vacation? And I think that once these separations become, more permanent or more seemingly permanent, it's easy, especially, divorce and separation, the family's in kind of a period of flux. So that might make sense in the short term, but in the long term, he might be like, whoa, wait, like if she's in Colorado, if she, then how am I going to see my kid ever? So it can start to look a little bit different too. So the words don't necessarily mean, what you think they mean or as much as you think they mean. So I think that can be a little tricky too, just being able to read the situation and figure out a way to move forward that not only allows you to be able to do what you want to do, but to be able to foster a close relationship between your child and their father basically wherever you live, which is, I mean, it's a tall order. It's easier now than it used to be with advances in technology, with being able to FaceTime quite so easily. I have a client lately who said that she has this camera that her kids put in their bedroom and they can make a call to dad whenever they want to. She has it turned, it had some, I don't know what the brand of it is, but she said it has some settings. So she turned out like he can't just call in whenever and like, check into their house whenever he feels like it, but the kids can call him, and in a lot of ways that can make parenting over long distance is easier, but it's a challenging thing to do. So, if you had
I
a
have to
client,
caution parents too, if they have that situation where a young child is able to call whenever on this camera, they're gonna need to make sure they're checking that it's turned off again, because young children have a habit of,
leaving.
running away, like, okay, bye, dad, and leaving, and the camera is still rolling, and,
Yeah.
mom will be picked up 5 hours later, shouting about the mess that was made or some other thing,
Mhm.
and you don't want to be in a position where you're making evidence against yourself.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think you always have to be mindful if it's an abusive or a high conflict co-parent, someone who is using phone calls as a window into your life and trying to use it to gather evidence against you. That's obviously not ideal. And like you already said, it's a case by case basis. You got to look at the specific facts in each case. What's good in one might not be good in the other, and use those facts to kind of guide you as you're figuring out a new normal. But yeah, definitely even something simple that doesn't generate evidence against you, even if you like were to walk by topless or something, like you just don't want it. You don't want that. You want to be very, very careful about, cameras in your home and how they're used, whether they're being used like against you to generate evidence or just potentially embarrassing. In any case, we don't want that to happen. But if you had a client, Lori, or a potential client coming into your office who was desperate to get out of Virginia to be closer to friends, family, her job, or a larger support network, what advice would you give her to help start preparing for that case to make sure that she had the best chance of being successful?
So a lot of the advice is also fact specific in that it really depends on what kind of timeline you've got. So if someone is telling you, I want to leave tomorrow, I mean, you know, okay, well, there's not a whole lot I can do to help you to prepare to be in a better position,
Hmm.
right? So I can't really make up facts, but if someone comes in early enough, the things that I would tell them to do is, number one, start documenting his parenting time. How much time is he actually spending with the kids? And is it time on the weekends, or is he involved in the day to day? Is he coaching Little League, or is he, perfectly content to hear about it later, or maybe not even seeing the kids very often at all? So I think
Right.
that's a certain important fact specific issue that you really have to address up front. If he is not just a good dad, but a real hands-on dad who's really in the trenches with these kids or this kid, you're going to have a much harder time, because naturally moving farther away is going to make his parenting time very difficult.
Hmm.
If he's only spending every other weekend and you can negotiate something that he will still get as every other weekend, because you can either take the time or take the money to make sure your kids get to him every other weekend still, or possibly once a month, but longer in the summer or something along those lines, you might be able to negotiate something. So
Right.
step one is, let's document what the actual parenting time has been. And then step two is, let's evaluate that parenting time and let's see if it's actually a positive thing. If it's positive and it's helping the children and it's positive in all respects, then again, you got a bigger problem than if he's kind of an absentee father who's been gone for 6 months.
Right.
Where does dad live? Does dad live next door to you, or does he live in another state? Obviously, if he lives in another state, you'll have a much easier time getting a relocation. So with military families, this comes up a lot. The military family might be PCSing in a minute, or in a month or in 6 months. And maybe you have to wait it out until he PCSs and you don't go.
Hmm.
And then you can make an argument that it's just as easy for him to visit from where you want to be as where you are now. I don't know what the fact pattern is on every case until I meet with people, but those are kind of key topic areas. Let's evaluate the quality of his parenting,
Yeah.
right?
And remember, it's all down to the best interest of the child, right? We're not talking about the best interests of mom or the best interests of dad. So the question isn't what job do you have or how much money can you make, or, where's your mom, where's your family, your extended family, how, free childcare you could have if you moved somewhere else.
That's
But
a really important point, Katie. I
yeah.
want you to know, or I want the people watching this to know, that best interest is the standard for a relocation case if you're the first time in.
Mhm.
In other words, if you're going you've never had a court order between you,
Right.
and this is your first time getting a court order to reflect your parenting time. But if you've already got a court order and you're looking to modify this, the standard not only is best interest, but you also have to meet an additional burden. If you're the one that wants to relocate, you have to be able to demonstrate that this relocation is going to have independent benefits to your children, not just benefits to you, but benefits that are specifically for your children in the relocation
Mhm.
that are significant enough to offset whatever the detriment is in terms of them not having a good relationship or a continuing relationship of the same caliber with the other parent.
And that's a big ask, right? The court
That's
is
huge.
placing this relationship with dad on this pedestal. So to be able to like meet or exceed that level of benefit to the child is,
It's a heavy burden.
yeah,
It
it's a
really
heavy
is.
burden. It's a tall order. It's a lot to think about. So I would definitely be spending some time thinking about like not what is the benefit to me, but how is this going to impact my child positively, more positively than the relationship with dad.
So
Or
for
with dad being,
example, this is very specific. If it's something for the benefit of your child, it doesn't mean that they're going to be closer to grandma and be able to be watched by family when you're at work. That might be a benefit, but it's really more of a benefit to you.
Mhm.
Something like it's close to the medical facility where your child can get necessary medical care might be something that's beneficial to the child specifically versus to the parent. They're very nuanced
Mhm.
burden here in terms of trying to establish that it's best for the child. It has to be really specifically beneficial to the child.
Yeah, it's tough. It's definitely tough
Very
and
tough.
yeah, scary to face those cases. I think too, it's always wise to think about what your parenting plan might even look like if you relocate based on depending on, I mean, what are we talking about from Virginia to California or Virginia to North Carolina? Like, is this something that we could still do, frequent visits with the other parent, or is it something where you're going to have to look at maybe giving the entire summer or all of, I mean, I had a case once where the judge ordered every holiday to dad because my client was able to relocate. And I mean, obviously it's an individual question. Is that worth it to you? Like if it were to end up like that, would you still want to go or would you rather, be able to have some time in the summer with the kids, be able to, take a vacation? Are you only going to have the business, the
Can you
businessy time?
afford it?
Yeah.
You have to offset what the benefits are to you from the costs because you most likely are going to have to transport this child for
Mhm.
dad's visitation.
Too. Yeah.
So if you're moving to Japan, that's a big expense to try to get this child back and forth to Virginia so that dad can enjoy some parenting time.
Yeah. The
That's, something you
logistics.
have to factor in.
It's
Yeah.
tough. And it's also a different thing when we're talking about infants who aren't in
Mhm.
school or when we're talking about kids who have a school schedule, a sports schedule, whatever they're into. It's easy. You can do a lot of things with kids that aren't in school, but then you have a school schedule and suddenly life is mapped out in ways that you can't really, control or influence unless you're homeschooling, you don't have a lot of control over what that
Even if
academic
you're
calendar is going.
homeschooling, you still have to be able to homeschool
Yeah, they have
them.
to go to school.
Yeah,
You still have to, meet certain milestones, but I mean, more flexibility in terms of planning your schedule, but not, entirely. I mean, kids are nothing if not inflexible, right? Like,
right, right.
it can be a tough life with little ones at home, but and relocation in a lot of ways makes it harder rather than easier.
Makes it harder because you're gonna be doing all the parenting, but again, fact specific. If you were doing it all by yourself anyway, maybe it will be a little bit easier to have your family around or someone that can help you, but again, that's not a benefit necessarily to the child. Even you
Yeah.
having a roof over your head is not necessarily a benefit inimical to the child because presumably they have
You have a roof
a roof
already,
over their
right?
head at dad's house, even if they don't have one at your
Yeah.
house.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
it's, yeah, those are challenging cases. They really are. And the more lead time you have to prepare, I think the better off you're gonna make
Yeah.
out on this,
Yeah.
being able to show that there's good schools and that there's, a good living situation and, great transportation system back and forth to wherever dad lives.
Right.
Those kind of things, having a game plan on how you're going to be able to keep up with that relationship.
Yes, a
Yeah,
game plan. Have a plan. Don't just go in there and say, "Oh, we'll work it out." A plan for how you're going to make sure that it works out.
right.
You're going to have to be proactive in terms of prioritizing the relationship with dad too, and that's a tough thing to do too.
Sure. And
Well,
again, if you have lead time, there's a lot of things that you can do to kind of set the stage a little bit for you. Like, for example, maybe you're at a place where you don't even ask dad for anything anymore because for so long he has said, no, work it out, figure it out yourself. Well, if that's the case, you need to be able to document that he's still saying, no, figure it out yourself.
yeah.
Right? I mean, those kinds of things would be helpful. So you might want to set him up a little bit by asking him for help and hoping that he says no, so that you have a history of him not really co-parenting with you.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things like that if you have lead time, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. All good insights. Thank you, Laura. I think this has been really helpful and lots of information about relocation. Lots of things to consider if relocation is something that's on your mind. I definitely also encourage you to check out our website at hoflaw.com. That's HOFLAW.com. We have 4 free books and a number of free reports and blogs, tons of things on relocation. So if you're looking for more information about what you should do or what the independent benefit might look like, definitely check out the website and schedule an appointment with Lori, the expert. But thank you again, Lori, for being here. This is great, and I've appreciated your time. Thanks so much to everyone for tuning in.